We have Mira Freiman with us today, who's going to talk about experience in nature. It's an awesome day to talk about that, I guess, in terms of weather. And yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry the room is in a bit of disarray, but I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to make yourselves comfortable. I found with my research working in nature that people tend not to put themselves in the
I'm going to start there, and I'll get you to just...
They always sort of center on something. So I was curious to see, but everybody sort of took the seats that that was arranged. But anyways, I hope you're all comfortable. And so my talk is called Experiencing Nature, and I'm Mira Freiman, as you said. I was going to tell you about two kinds of experience that I have. One is my academic experience, and the other is my nature experience. Before I start, so academic, I'm working on my MA. The topic is how canoe tripping or outdoor adventure tripping affects participants' connectedness with nature. And I've been an outdoor guide for 8 summers, working for 2 different organizations, and just personally like spending time, a lot of time outside, loving being outside. And academically, so I have an undergrad from Guelph in science psychology, so BSc in psychology, and my BEd from Ottawa U, so I know what you guys are going through, and now my MA. So like I said, my topic is connection with nature, but I think I take a perspective towards environmental education that's a little different, and it's the perspective I'm going to be working from today. So I have this quote, it's a little bit long, that I'm going to bring onto the screen in a sec. And it very articulately brings you into my perspective, so I wanted to use it. And then we can talk about it for a bit. So I'll give you a chance to read it. So I wanted to ask if this is a perspective that you guys have heard in your BEd so far, or found on your own, or what your opinion of this approach to environmental education. Throw stuff in.
It makes sense to change our worldview, change our perspective, and how what relationship we have with our environment. So that makes sense to me. Like it's to do with us and our relationship with the environment. The environment is outside.
Separate.
Yeah, I think separate.
Anybody else?
Just off the bat, I mean, it's really deep, and I might personally, relate to certain ideas in it and stuff. But right away I start thinking, like, how would I ever convey this, idea in a PJ classroom? But that's personally cool.
I think that's something that comes up too when you talk about our program and talking about environmental education in the context of this program and how to implement it. I think it's a lot easier sometimes to talk about specific activities, but ultimately I think we have to start talking about worldview and mind-view, and that's hard to talk about.
Yeah. You want to say something else?
No,
Oh,
sorry.
okay. I thought it was like, I want to say something, but no. So there's a few things that's important for me. One is to see that the first bit where we're like not looking to save the planet and be stewards of the planet, but really the planet's going to be fine. It's really us that needs the saving, and we need the planet in the way that it is. And so it's saving ourselves, and we need to look to the earth for that, like to help us, not the other way around. So that's really important. And I've bolded the last two lines because this is sort of centers on my topic, which I call connection with nature, this relationship. It's directed towards the positive, which is something that I like to do in environmental education. So, but before I start telling you about connection with nature, I wanted to ask you guys about connection with nature, and particularly if there's, like, I'd like you to think back and think of a time where you personally felt connected with nature. And if you feel like telling me about it, that's awesome.
Camping,
Camping?
you know, just the cottage, brownies, guides, all that kind of stuff. Make your own fort and sleep in it overnight, which is not too fun.
No. You like doing it today?
Well, I asked my instructors to go camping because
No. Yeah.
No, when you're talking about whether or not it's too late, and you brought up camping as well. In high school, we had an outdoor ed class, and one of the trips we took was winter camping. So I find that sometimes if I am camping in the summer, because I'm so comfortable, I don't think about, if I'm having fun time with my friends, I could be inside or outside. I'm not really aware of my environment. But winter camping, I was keeping aware of the conditions.
I'm really glad you used the word comfortable,
Yeah.
because I'm going to bring that up later. So, is there anyone else who wanted to throw something out?
Well, I guess, like, I just had, like, swimming in the lake. I remember when I was young, just swimming in a lake and just keeping swimming and swimming. That was just I guess, where I really felt connected to nature.
So, I'm glad we're talking about it. I think it's also, like, something people wouldn't, like, it's a little uncomfortable to talk about, I think. It's a little bit to do with maybe your spirituality, and people may not be as eager to talk about it as other things. So I have a story that I wanted to talk about, and that mine happens in a bar in Toronto, which is an unlikely place for this to begin. It's Smokeless Joe's, if anyone's ever been there. And I was sitting there with a few of my friends who are also outdoor adventure guides, and I was telling them about my cottage and how I really like hiking the hills, and this one guy was like, so, like, what is it that you like to hike the hills, like, why? And I was, like, describing the feeling that when I get to the top, I'm, like, hearing the leaves, and I'm feeling the breeze, and I'm, like, breathing the air, looking out at this area, it's up at my cottage, so it's, like, my home. It's where I can remember all the different things and hikes that my parents took me on, and I'm in my home, but I'm also sort of looking at it as a whole. And I was sober, but I just started to cry. And this was, you know, for me to move to Toronto was pretty tough at the time, and being like a student without money to sort of get to nature and wheels to get to nature, like a car, it was like, I didn't realize that I was like homesick for that home, of standing on that hill and looking out. So that's my story. And before you think that I'm on my own little green planet, I wanted to talk about how connection with nature is talked about in the educational literature. So this one person, Blanchett Cohen, she created an environmental agency framework, which is in the shape of a pyramid. And on the bottom of it, the base of it, is connection with nature. And she characterized it in two ways. One is wonder, and interrelatedness is the second. So wonder is the sense of fulfillment and contentment in being in nature. And the interrelatedness is relationship with the physical environment. Altogether, in general, she says, connectedness with the environment has an affective, almost magical element to it. And her study, I think, was focused on primary school kids. And then, have any of you heard of David Sobel? I know you have. Yeah. So he talks about moments of transcendence, when the borders between the natural world and ourselves break down. He also says that once you've felt at one with the natural world, it will powerfully compel you to environmental ethics and behavior. So that's sort of a good starting point for talking about connection with nature. So, and then outside, I'm not going to take too much time with this slide because this will take a very long time, but outside of environmental education, people have been attributing the environmental crisis to human relationship with nature. And these are different names for different theories that basically all center on this idea of our relationship with nature. The last one, nature deficit disorder, you guys heard of it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's been made popular in 2005 with Richard Lou's new book, Last Child in the Woods. And for those of you who don't know, it describes the human cost of being alienated from nature. And it's popping up in like policy in the States and in the media all over the place. So this sort of idea is becoming more centerfold for people. So the question is, how do you support something like connection with nature? And my suggestion is by experiencing it, which is going outside, and this is a group of kids, swimming in a river, they're pretty happy. So just to explain. And my study is using canoe tripping in supporting connection with nature. But I don't know if everybody here would be comfortable in taking their kids onto, you know, a 10-day canoe trip. But it doesn't have to be a canoe trip or anything with a crazy adrenaline rushes, or anytime you're in nature, you can really support connection with nature. And my hope is that you guys, after hearing me, recognize as teachers that when you're outside with kids, you don't necessarily need to be classifying things, but you can just sort of support the connection with nature. So I wanted to talk about comfort, which we brought up earlier. Thank you. And I wanted to ask you guys, what are you comfortable doing with kids outside? It's good for me to know for the rest of my presentation. Like, what would be like the sort of, would you be comfortable taking kids camping for like an overnight? No. That depends on the age. So what age would you?
Intermediate senior.
Would be a camping age? Okay.
I would have said the opposite.
Primary?
I would have said the opposite, like, because I would be worried that, like, I don't know, like my students, if they would be like grade 11 or something, would sneak out and go smoke weed or that sort of stuff, and then I would get, anyway, I guess that's my own worry, but.
I wouldn't be comfortable with anything involving any age, overnight, or near water, but I'm just super paranoid. Like, even, and like, I don't know,
Well,
I don't know
that's
if
fair.
that's,
Yeah.
you know, reasonable concern for anybody, but even like my family members that are young, I'm just overly cautious about what can happen with water or when I'm sleeping.
I did my ECE last year, so a lot of that is very much the hands-on, getting outside, and we actually did a field trip with our class to a nature area, and I am all about the put on your rubber boots, put on your splash pants, let's go walk 3 feet into the pond and see what we find kind of thing. Like, I am all for that, especially when they're in primary and getting them out, and even if it's just put on your rubber boots and let's go jump in the puddles. Just get outside and do something that's more hands-on.
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk about today. Like, not necessarily needing to go on. No. I'm really glad you said what you said, and I'm going to come back to that later. But just the idea that it doesn't have to be like a 10-day canoe trip. That, you know, if you're going on a field trip for some other purpose, for science or whatever, and there's going to be in nature, consider supporting connection with nature and moving away from just the exact purpose.
Intellectual.
Yeah. Cognitive sort of stuff.
Yeah.